Hurricane Laura emerges in the Gulf with a track pointing to the Louisiana coastline, potentially hitting as a major Category 3 hurricane. Our meteorologists are live to break down the new models just in moments ago from the National Hurricane Center here on Tracking the Tropics. Hey there, everybody. JB Buno here within the top right-hand portion of your screen, being joined by Tracking the Tropics meteorologist Ian Oliver, right underneath me. And then in the bottom right, joining us from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, very eager to hear his perspective, Chief Meteorologist Jesse Gunkel at WVLA, again in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Louisiana and Laura are going to be in the same sentence quite a bit over the next 48, 72 hours. We're going to get to Ian here for the latest, but as a reminder, you can use the hashtags that you see on the right side of your screen underneath each one of our names. Hashtag HeyJB, hashtag HeyIan, hashtag HeyJesse. If you want to ask a question to our team, we're going to be going to your Facebook Live questions here momentarily. But first, we're going to begin with Tracking the Tropics meteorologist Ian Oliver standing by at the wall with the very latest on Hurricane Laura. Hey there, Ian.
JB, good afternoon. Now, if you were with us yesterday for our stream, we were tracking then Tropical Storm Laura in the northwestern Caribbean, and we were talking about one last hurdle that it needed to overcome. The western portion of Cuba did that with no problem last night. That inner core still very well defined and getting better defined. Now, earlier this morning, around 8:15 a.m., hurricane hunters were in the storm. They found it had intensified to our fourth hurricane of the season and still intensifying. Another hurricane hunter flight in the system right now, and what they're finding is there may be some maximum sustained winds a little bit better than what is represented here in this 2 o'clock advisory from the National Hurricane Center. So it's motion right now, west-northwest at 16 miles per hour with maximum sustained winds of around 75 miles per hour, so a low-end Category 1 hurricane at this point. The issue is what happens from here, and we've been talking about over the last couple of days, once it emerged into the Gulf of Mexico, there really wouldn't be a whole lot to stop this system from intensifying. That is the forecast as we move through, especially the next 24 hours. There's a period here of perhaps even rapid intensification occurring. The definition of that, 35 miles per hour of intensification in a 24-hour period, and you can see that essentially represented here by the forecast track from the National Hurricane Center, which takes a bend towards the northwest and then eventually the north near the Texas and Louisiana border. From the upper Texas Gulf Coast to the southwestern portion of Louisiana, the forecast at this point is for a landfall at a major Category 3 hurricane status with maximum sustained winds of near 115 miles per hour. Conditions very good in the short term outside of a little bit of wind shear, a little bit of cooler water, tiny bit of that was upwelled by Marco as that system fizzled across the northern Gulf Coast. But there isn't a whole lot to inhibit this system, at least in the short term. You see the long-term forecast track, once it moves onshore, gets picked up in the westerlies and eventually makes a bend over towards the mid-Atlantic, bringing with it some of that tropical moisture. What we saw over the last 12 hours or so, a little bit of a shift westward with these forecast models. You see pretty good agreement, but there is significant spread when you're talking about what could be a major hurricane, with hurricane force winds extending about 50 miles out from the center of circulation and tropical storm force winds extending out close to 200 miles, about 175 miles. Where exactly this system moves on shore is going to dictate where we see the most intense impacts from this possibly major hurricane. And you see there are many areas here from Louisiana all the way back towards the Houston and Galveston area that have a very close eye on this system. We're going to be watching that very closely to dial in that track as we head through the next 24 to 36 hours with a forecast landfall sometime late tomorrow night, even into the early portion of the day on Thursday. This is the latest product from the National Hurricane Center. It came out back at 11 a.m. You see that very high likelihood of those hurricane force winds reaching the Sabine River area there. We'll be watching farther west or east for the eventual track of this system, but that is the general thinking at this point, and that's why there are hurricane warnings in effect for those areas, the upper Texas and Louisiana Gulf Coast right there, with tropical storm warnings extending farther off to the east. And of course, what we're always watching with tropical systems is the surge flooding threat, always the deadliest element of tropical systems. That's where we have storm surge warnings in effect with several feet of storm surge possibility with Laura. That's something we'll be watching very closely. Right on the right side, the eastern side of that center of circulation, that's likely where we'll see the greatest amount of storm surge. So we'll have to dial in that track as we move through the next 24 hours. I mentioned the amount of fuel that this system has. This is the Gulf of Mexico right here, and you look at those water temperatures, in the mid-80s. So outside of that tiny bit of wind shear that I mentioned, this is what's essentially gassing up Laura as it moves across the central portion of the Gulf. This is just one forecast model. This is the Barron model, and I wanted to show you the evolution of this system from right now, essentially this afternoon, to tomorrow afternoon. You see the reds in there indicating that's Category 2 force winds, and that intensification continues as the system approaches the Gulf Coast. Now, forecast models suggesting that there might be a little bit of wind shear right before the system gets to the Gulf Coast, so the possibility that we won't see this intensify all the way up until landfall, that's what we'll be hoping for, surely, but there is a general trend here over the next 24 hours for the intensification of this system, and then, of course, a quick weakening of the system as it continues to pass off to the north from there. So that's what it looks like right now with Hurricane Laura. I know, Jesse, this has been a very stressful week for you guys on the northern Gulf Coast. Watching Marco, thankfully, lesser impacts from that system as it really fizzled across the northern part of the Gulf Coast. But this one, you must have your eye on very closely.
Yeah, it started out last week. Obviously, we're calling for double trouble with Marco. Luckily, wind shear, obviously, that's a Met's favorite friend because that usually destroys these type of systems. And that's exactly what it did with Marco. That took all those thunderstorms, all that convection, and placed it quite a few miles to the east of us, just around the panhandle of Florida. They got doused yesterday with multiple inches of rainfall and even a tornadic threat as tornadoes were kind of popping up all across from Panama City and eastward. Now, for us, we're starting to see a couple of thunderstorms, just the lingering effects of remnant Marco out there, which is currently kind of skirting just along our coastline. So we've got gray skies now here in the capital area, which is the Baton Rouge area of Louisiana. And the story is obviously this beast now brewing in the central Gulf, because if it becomes a very large and massive storm, what I've been telling people is you got to have focus from the Houston area, potentially all the way to New Orleans. Again, it may look like landfall is going to happen, say, just around Lake Charles, a little bit south of there in Cameron Parish, right around Holly Beach. But again, the concern is you're looking at hurricane force winds that could extend nearly, by the time that system starts to brew and rapidly intensify, could be anywhere from 60 to 70 miles from the center. And again, if you look down the road and you drive from Lake Charles to Lafayette, that's an hour drive. So you're thinking that you could see hurricane force winds about halfway here. And yes, maybe even some very strong tropical storm force winds. Now, again, obviously we kind of lucked out with Marco. We didn't get the estimated rainfall that we were originally concerned about, because that would play a big time role on some of our rivers and streams here. Again, that's where everybody is pretty much under the gun, because after 2016, where we had multiple inches of rainfall in the 20 to 30 inch range, a lot of areas got flooded in the Baton Rouge area and around basically the entire Amite River basin. And that's obviously been a big time concern with this type of system, because it does have the potential to drop a lot of rainfall. Now, what I do want to point out is this type of system, I know a lot of people are talking about the resemblance of Rita back in 2005. And again, that is the case, kind of the same type of path. However, Rita did kind of skirt itself just south of Miami, right around the Florida Straits, and then it rapidly intensified as a Category 2, 3, 4, before eventually making landfall, even up to Category 5 before making landfall. So that all happened earlier. This is going to be a little bit different, because this is actually going to gain some steam just before landfall. This isn't going to happen out in the central Atlantic, which is a little bit alarming. It's going to actually be building up. It's not going to be cycling down, reproducing a new eye wall like what happened with Rita. It built up, and it was actually down cycling as it was making its way towards the coastline. So that's why we actually saw a little bit of a weaker forecast. Potentially, if this shift goes a little bit further east, this could be something a little bit more like a Gustav in 2008, and same type of scenario. It skirted south of Cuba, went across that little fringe of Cuba, that western half, quickly blew up, and it was about to be a Category 3 and then downgraded to a Category 2, and then drove up the Atchafalaya Basin, which is, just to give you an indication of where that is, that's about halfway between Lafayette and Baton Rouge. So again, there is that potential that it could take a jog, and we're just really just kind of keeping an eye on those steering winds. You can see it just off on the right-hand side of the screen, kind of drove right through Lafayette. But we were getting hurricane force winds in Baton Rouge, because there's nothing between Lafayette and Baton Rouge except for swamp and bayou. So again, you think gator hunters, that's exactly where it is. All that moisture comes in, and guess what? It's still tapping into some very warm waters, kind of pushing into that basin in between. And you got to think about even south of Lake Charles, Cameron Parish and Vermilion Parish, it's all water and bayous. That is like major hunting that's major like fishing and shrimping territory at this point. So again, really a lot to kind of keep an eye on, because I still not buying that the steering is going to go directly west towards a little bit more towards Texas as the latest shift. That ridge could erode a little bit. And if that's the case, it's going to start to make more of a northward turn a little bit sooner than later. And that's the concern, because then it'd be more of a Louisiana situation.
Chief Meteorologist Jesse Gunkel joining us, everybody, from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, right there in Louisiana. And I want to get to some of the comments that are coming in, everybody, on social media in just a moment. You see the meteorologist Q&A that we have now opened up. If you use the 3 hashtags on your screen, hashtag HeyJB, hashtag HeyIan, hashtag HeyJesse, in about 2 to 3 minutes, we're going to start to get to some of your questions that are beginning to pop up here in the Facebook Live comment section. Again, use one of those hashtags, and we'll start to take some of those questions and ask them directly to Ian and Jesse. But back here to the warnings and the watches, we've been talking a lot about Louisiana here, Ian, but based on the graphics that I've been seeing, especially your tropical winds graphics, Houston looks to really be in play here. What can we expect in the next 36 hours for eastern Texas, especially the city of Houston?
I think that's going to be kind of the big question mark, JB, which is why you saw the broad area of watches and warnings issued. Everyone essentially needs to be on notice. That was, as we talked about yesterday, if there's a good thing about a tropical system, talking about Marco now, thankfully that dissipated and the impacts from that were greatly reduced, but it kind of put everybody on notice. Hey, the Gulf is active, and now we're talking about the main event. We're into the main event at this point. This is the one to be staring at. We're in late August now. We're a couple weeks from the peak of the tropical season. This should be the point of the season where you're well prepared to put a hurricane plan into place quickly. Well, for these folks, that is ultra the case at this point. Essentially anywhere from Houston over towards where Jesse's joining us from in Baton Rouge, there is wiggle room both ways with this system. We saw some trends back to the west. We could just as easily in the next 24 to 36 hours before the landfall occurs see a bit of a jog back to the east. So that's why you really need to stay vigilant with what looks to be a very powerful, very dangerous system, the possibility of a major landfalling hurricane, all the threats that come along with that. So everyone that could even reasonably possibly be affected by this needs to be staring at it as we move through the middle part of this week.
As we get to now some of your questions that are coming in via Facebook Live, again with hashtag HeyJB, hashtag HeyIan, hashtag HeyJesse, we're going to start taking some of the questions that are coming in. And the first one comes in for WVLA Chief Meteorologist Jesse Gunkel from Matt Miller on KLFY's Facebook page out of Louisiana. Hashtag HeyJesse, how bad will the winds be in Lafayette, Louisiana?
Yeah, right now we're kind of looking at winds probably in the category of very weak hurricane, most likely a very strong tropical storm. So we're going to kind of start to see those winds probably in the 40 to maybe 50 mile an hour range, probably sustained, maybe some stronger wind gusts, maybe up to that 60 to 70 mile an hour category. And I would assume that would be for Lafayette. That's with the current track. Again, that's not saying that the track shifts a little bit further east, because if that happens, well, obviously the winds will be a little bit stronger and more sustained. Same thing if it pushes a little bit further west, well, then we could, Lafayette could only look for the whole Acadiana area. We're talking more so than just tropical storm force winds at this point. So again, if you saw the watches and warnings out there, there are portions of Acadiana underneath that tropical storm warning. There are also portions that are underneath that hurricane warning. So it kind of divides the area in half at this point. So again, the closer you are to the core of the system, those stronger winds are going to be there. And they're definitely going to be on the eastern side of this system. So again, with the current path, Lake Charles is going to get slammed. You get about halfway through about Jennings, still slammed. And then as soon as you approach maybe Scott area, then the winds will be a little bit lighter. And then probably going into the Broussard and Lafayette area, again, maybe in that again, that 50, maybe 60 mile an hour range at times. So again, I know everybody's complacent right now, and I think that's the key here, because after what happened with Marco, everybody's going, all right, let's stand back. Can this be just as bad? No, this is a serious situation, and we don't get many of these that often.
Next question coming in from KARK's Facebook page in Arkansas, Jonathan Gatlin here with this question for hashtag Hey Ian. Is it going to hit northwest Arkansas?
So what we'll see is this system start to weaken fairly quickly once it moves on shore. Now, it will propagate farther off to the north from there, but you see this is the latest forecast track from the National Hurricane Center. And I'm sorry, you said northwestern parts of Arkansas?
Yes, northwest Arkansas.
So what happens once it moves on shore is it starts getting picked up in the westerlies, and that's why it makes that fairly quick turn off to the east. And you can see that general trend here. There's still some wiggle room here with how quickly that happens. It's all going to depend on where exactly this moves on shore. What is the structure of the system at this point? But you should point out, as we head into the middle part of, what would that be? That would be overnight Thursday night and into the early part of Friday. We're still talking about a tropical storm bringing at least some gusty winds, some locally heavy rainfall, some of the other threats that tropical storms bring in terms of flash flooding, a lot of spin in the atmosphere. Sometimes we can see some additional tornado threats extending well inland from the coast. So we're not talking about a major hurricane moving towards that direction, but certainly some impacts and possibility as some of the rain and gusty winds spread your direction by the end of this week.
We also have another comment coming in here from KLFY's Facebook page in Lafayette, Louisiana. It comes from Ashley Bork, and it's hashtag HeyJB. Is there a possibility it will move more east? And of course, I'm a host here on Tracking the Tropics, not a meteorologist, so I'm going to send this one over to Jesse Gunkel to answer Ashley's question on the possibility that this track, Jesse, could it move more to the east?
Yeah, there is that potential it could. Again, if we see that ridge, which is currently driving it west right now, kind of more westward across the Gulf, if that ridge kind of breaks down just a little bit, it's going to allow this system to find that weakness in between a big trough. With the trough is what's going to turn it northbound, okay? So that's why we start to get that turn about, you see kind of in that, right when it turns to about a Category 3 on this map, you see that's where we start to get that turn because that trough starts to drive it northbound where we get hopefully a little bit of wind shear just ahead of that system as it starts to make its way towards the state line of Texas and Louisiana. But again, if that ridge, right now models are showing it's pretty dominant, but if it kind of backs off, there is that potential that it could start to inch a few miles towards the east. Do I see a major shift? Probably not, but I could see it moving a few more miles back towards the east, maybe back towards the Lake Charles, or maybe even just a hair east of Lake Charles over the next 36 hours.
All right, the next question coming in, everybody. It's for meteorologist Ian Oliver. It comes from Amy Leonard from KRK's Facebook page in Arkansas. Hashtag Ian. Will this cause tornadoes for Arkansas? What kind of weather should we expect?
It's a definite possibility, Amy, as we talked about. The spin associated with tropical systems, this is going to move inland pretty quickly, and still a forecast at this point from the National Hurricane Center maintaining tropical storm intensity, likely starting to lose its tropical characteristics as it spreads inland, but it's going to bring with it some locally heavy rainfall. It's going to bring with it some gusty winds, and because of the amount of spin that's lingering in the atmosphere, that's why it can be pretty easy to spin up at least some weaker tornadoes. So that will be a threat that moves inland as the system spins down essentially once it starts to make landfall, and then the weakening trend should be fairly quick, but by the time it moves into Arkansas, still bringing some gusty winds with it, still bringing some heavy rain, and at least a low-end threat for some isolated tornadoes.
Let's get to this next question coming in from Lori Crosby from KRK's Facebook page in Arkansas. Hashtag Hey Jesse, what's the height of the storm surge wall potential? So a good question here for Jesse here to weigh in on.
Yeah, right now, kind of where it's expected to make landfall, we're probably looking at about 7 to 11, potentially more than that, which is, and we're talking feet. Again, we're not talking inches, we're talking feet. Obviously, we've had kind of water getting pushed already in along the coastline for a lot of areas out there already, just because of Marco, which is currently drifting across the Louisiana coastline right now. So again, the water's already pushing in. There's been a pretty steady easterly flow, and that's only going to increase as the system moves a little bit further closer to the coast, kind of makes that track up towards the northwest. So yeah, we're talking maybe 7, 11 on average, potentially more than that, which means we could be seeing storm surge a couple miles inland from the coast. So if you live in Cameron Parish, if you live in Vermilion Parish, if you live a little bit south of Beaumont, you could be seeing water maybe 2-3 miles in. And if you zoom in, this is perfect, you can see that there are a lot of areas. That's Calcasieu Lake, just south of Lake Charles. But then there's Lake Charles Lake, and there's a little bit of a stream that runs up to it. If you've ever driven along I-10, there are a bunch of casinos right there. Well, what happens is there's also a big massive lake right there too. So all that water has to get pushed inland at some point. There's a lot of water just kind of button up along the coastline, south of Lake Arthur, you can see there, south of Gadon, south of Kaplan, you can see those are all again, that's all marsh, that's all swamp. So it doesn't take much for that water to get pushed inland and affect a lot of areas. Even if you head towards Galveston Bay, you can see that there's a lot of water near the coastline, a lot of oil rigs out there too. So people are already starting evacuations. Again, a lot of the shrimp boats are already starting to come in at this point. You can see all the way down towards Texas City and Galveston. Galveston Island is currently surrounded by water. So if you're talking 7 to 11, I mean, if you know all that infrastructure out there, I mean, you're talking a lot of that island being submerged by water.
Another question coming in here, everybody, from KLFY's Facebook page is Jessica Hargrave with this one. Hashtag, hey, Jesse, which direction should we head if we decide to evacuate in Vermilion Parish is the question joining from KLFY's Facebook page. Jessica joining us there.
Yeah, Jessica, good question. It depends. Honestly, it depends on where you probably have some people to stay with, because best bet is if you're going to go west, you can take 10, go through the Houston area and keep driving maybe to Austin, Texas. You'd be fine in Dallas. If you get to anywhere west of there, San Antonio would be fine. Or go due east, probably east of Baton Rouge to maybe, I wouldn't go so early to go to New Orleans at this point, but if you headed towards the Jackson area or even a little bit further east towards, say, Mobile, maybe up towards somewhere in Mississippi, Alabama. And again, if you see that a lot of this rainfall is eventually going to be making its way up to maybe even the Tennessee River Valley. So best bet at this point is to probably head west towards Texas, but get west of the Houston area.
Next question is coming in. It is hashtag, hey, Jesse, but we're going to give our meteorologist here a break and continue this roundtable format here. Tori Daniel Grogan from KLFY's Facebook page. I'm going to send this one over to Ian Oliver. Hashtag, hey, Jesse, would you advise us to leave? Or wait, did we just take this question? I'm trying to remember.
It's a similar question.
Similar question. So, Ian, why don't you weigh in here?
The key here is always trust and listen to your local authorities. If they're asking you to leave, if there's a evacuation order, then you 100% should leave. And Jesse, I'm going to defer to you on this. You got the local knowledge here. What kind of shape are you guys in as far? I've heard of a number of evacuation orders. Are there many in your area?
Yeah, they're starting to. There are some, what do you call the barrier islands and stuff. They're already starting to with Grand Isle, Port Fourchon, which is all kind of south of New Orleans. Anything between there, Shell Island. There's Pecan Island, Marsh Island, all those areas are evacuating right now, all under mandatory evacuations. Cameron Parish, which is basically right where the center of Florida is expected to go across, that is a mandatory evacuation at this point. I'm not sure about Vermilion Parish yet, but again, our governor is going to come with a press conference at 6 o'clock this evening. So again, tune into that because he's going to have the very latest as to road closures. It sounds like the Department of Transportation is already starting to shut down multiple areas at this point. So roadways not allowing people to go back to some of those coastal parishes or coastal towns and cities. So if you have to if they tell you grab your stuff and get out of there at this point. So now for Lafayette, it just depends in the region. If you're in the city of Lafayette, you could probably hunker down. If you're a little bit further south, New Iberia, Morgan City, if you're talking Abbeville, that area, probably find a better place to go at this point.
I want to hop in here because we are getting a lot of questions about Abbeville here in the Facebook Live comment section. A big number of viewers that are joining us, particularly from there, including this next comment. I want to make sure I'm loading up all my comments here correctly and not doubling up. But yeah, I think I have it up here from one of our Facebook Live commenters, Morgan Campbell from KLFY, one of the many commenters joining us here from Abbeville. Hashtag, hey, Jesse, how bad will it be and how bad will it be affected?
Yeah, I mean, right now, Abbeville on the current track is right on the fringe. So you're kind of in that transition between probably going to get some hurricane force winds at some point. Now, will it be sustained? Probably not. But yeah, you're going to probably get some hurricane force winds. And again, if you drive a little bit south of it, you see Youngsville, Abbeville's in the bottom, say, right-hand corner there. You're going to see that body of water is very close. And if you make that drive a little bit further south, yeah, if people know that area, that's basically where they make hot sauce, Tabasco sauce. So again, that whole area, you're going to be looking at a lot of water kind of moving and pushing further inland. So am I Abbeville, am I worried about storm surge? Maybe, maybe not. There again, there is a chance if you're sitting far enough inland that you shouldn't have that risk. But heavy rain, inland flooding is definitely an issue. And again, for where you guys sit, you could see anywhere from 6 to maybe 12 plus in some areas. Again, if you get stuck underneath one of those feeder bands, and that's also one of the concerns for the Baton Rouge area, we get stuck under a feeder band, we could be sitting underneath it for 12 to maybe 16 hours. And that is going to be an issue because in those feeder bands, you could easily see 3, 6, 8 inches of rain in a very short amount of time. We're talking over an hour. So yeah, this is a very potentially dangerous situation, obviously.
With last call, everybody. This is going to be a last call for questions, and we know that we've received hundreds of hashtag HeyJB, hashtag HeyIan, hashtag HeyJesse comments here in the Facebook Live comment section. We are trying to get to as many as we can across as many Facebook pages as we can. Of course, we're broadcasting here not just to Louisiana, not just to Texas. We're broadcasting really to the entire southeastern United States, so it's a lot of comments for us to go through in real time, and we're doing our best to get to as many of them as possible. But again, if you use the hashtags underneath our names on the right side of your screen, we can look for those comments specifically on Facebook Live and try to bring them up on screen to answer your comments specifically. The next one coming in here, everybody, it is from, oh no, that was the one that we just took from Morgan Campbell. Let's see if we can get to this one here, and I'm gonna actually, you know, I had a tornado question in here that I just lost, so I'm going to try to get that one back up here. But let's stay with Abbeville just for one more second while we have this up. Cindy Strickland from KLFY, hashtag HeyJesse. I live in Abbeville, so if Laura shifts east again and we are in line for a direct hit, how far inland would the storm surge go, Jesse?
Yeah, that's a little bit tricky. You guys are a few miles from the coast, but directly due south, probably 7 to 11 feet of storm surge. Now, how far does that actually push in? Obviously, it's all sea level generally in that area. A lot of low-lying areas, a lot of marsh. So, again, there is that potential that a lot of that water could push pretty close to Abbeville. Again, if the track goes a little bit further west, let's hope for that scenario. Things will be much better in the Abbeville area. But if it, again, jogs just a couple miles, not much, to the east, again, that's going to be a little bit more concerning because you got to look the wind field on this system. If this thing becomes a category 3, you're going to see a pretty massive wind field on this sucker, and which means that thing is going to drive all of that water, not just not just the day of, but we're talking from the southern Gulf, driving that water and moisture inland. So, yeah, notice that wind field just at this hour, how massive it is, and it's expected to get bigger if it doesn't really kind of come into place with all that wind shear.
We have another, I now have the tornado question ready to go, and I'm going to bring in Ian here because Ian is the one controlling our weather graphics here from WFLA, and this actually coming in from Pedro Pierre Peter, PPP, from WGNO in Louisiana. Hashtag, hey Jesse, where are the biggest tornado threats for the current track? So I'm going to give Jesse a bit of a break here. Send this one over to Ian Oliver here next to me in the Stream Center. Ian, where are we looking at the biggest tornado threats with the current track from the National Hurricane Center?
Yeah, we got a JPP here on the Bucks. This is a PPP.
That's
so
right.
It's a great question. Yeah, northeastern quadrant of the hurricane. That's always where we're looking for the greatest wind gusts and also the greatest wind shear with these bands moving on shore. A lot of rotation in the atmosphere, so that's likely where we would see the greatest threat of tornadoes. That's where we typically see the greatest amounts of wind damage, but also within that swath of wind damage, sometimes you see these isolated, intense or greater amounts of wind damage, and that's oftentimes where landfalling hurricanes can spin up these quick, isolated but intense tornadoes. So that's where we'll be looking for the northeastern quadrant, the right side essentially, immediately to the right of wherever the center of the storm comes on shore. And as Jesse and I have talked about, there's still a little bit of wiggle. Is it going to be upper Texas? Is it going to be the western portion of the Louisiana Gulf Coast? That is what will likely be ironing out over the next 24 hours. We're talking about a landfall late tomorrow night, early Thursday morning. So that picture should get a little bit more clear as Jesse was talking about the strength of that high, how quickly it encounters some of the influence of that upper level trough that's going to help turn it off to the north. Those are the competing factors as far as the eventual track, the exact track of this system. So we'll be watching closely for that during the day tomorrow.
Jesse, you want to weigh in there?
Yeah, again, talking about the tornado threat, main thing is, again, if you see how this system kind of trails, and this is a good image, Ian, thanks for showing it. you see that all those, if you kind of look just a little bit south of Louisiana, extending back into the Gulf of Mexico, all that kind of bubbling up, those are thunderstorms. Those are feeder bands that are coming from this system. So what happens is, even as that system starts to walk back towards the northeast, pushing around the Little Rock area, you can still see a lot of those feeder bands extending back into Louisiana. And that's where we have the potential threat for more isolated tornadoes to kind of quickly spawn. Again, because that's, again, where you get that wind shear. As it kind of scrapes, it creates these little spin-ups, these little quick tornadoes, but just enough to knock down tree limbs, cause power outages, maybe tear up your roof at some point, maybe throw your lawn furniture across the yard, little things like that. Again, there is that potential. Again, and that starts out maybe even as you see, landfall could be early Thursday morning, but the impacts for southeastern Louisiana may not actually come into play until Thursday evening, going into early Friday.
So we're getting a lot of comments, everybody, from KLFY's Facebook page in Lafayette, Louisiana. A lot of individuals asking about particular towns. What we're going to try to do here in just a moment is we're going to try to go rapid fire through that Facebook Live comment section and try to answer as many of your questions as possible, because I know that that is a Facebook page that is particularly active. So KLFY, we see all your comments, everybody. We see them scrolling in real time. We're going to try to do a rapid fire segment here in just a moment with as many of your questions, with as many of your locations that you're asking about here as possible. The last featured comment that we're going to get to here, everybody, if I can bring it up. This is a great question that I was going to ask earlier, but then we started, the meteorologist Q&A. It comes from Kimberly Riley from KLFY's Facebook page. And I'm going to ask this to both of you because this is such an important question. Hashtag, hey, Jesse, how slowly is it moving and how long will it sit over land regarding the amount of water relative to flooding? And we talk about this all the time on Tracking the Tropics. The speed in which the system is moving can dictate how much precipitation is going to be dumped over one particular area, especially a coastal area. So I'm going to bring you guys both up here on screen. Ian, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, and interesting to point out, if this makes landfall on the Texas side of the border, I believe that'll be the first major to strike Texas since Harvey. And Harvey is exactly what you're speaking about, JB. It was the speed of Harvey that caused so much problems. It essentially moved to the coast and stopped. This is not the scenario with this system, thankfully. There's that little gateway that we were talking about. You get the high pressure off to the north and east. You get that trough of low pressure in the upper levels of the atmosphere that's off to the north and west, and it helps to shoot this thing northward. You can see that reflected in the forecast track here from the National Hurricane Center. So time over water in the short term is very bad because we're talking about the energy source for this system. It's the warm waters of the Gulf. We showed you those 85, 86 degrees, a little bit warmer in some spots, at least in shallow depths. That's what's cranking this thing up in the short term. The good news, though, is you see these lines indicating the motion. That's 12 hours from when you see Category 2 to Category 3 on Wednesday, and then it continues to move off to the north at a pretty good clip. So are we expecting a lot of heavy rainfall with this? Of course. It's the potential to be a major hurricane. It's not one that's going to be slowing or stopping, though, as it approaches the Gulf Coast, which it doesn't eliminate. It helps to mitigate some of those intense, ridiculous rainfall amounts that we saw from Harvey. We're still going to see a lot of heavy rain with this, Jesse, but it's not magnitudes like that. But every storm is different. Each one has its own set of threats.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at this type of situation, obviously this is, yeah, it may be a Category 3, but right now this is probably the best case scenario because it is moving. It's moving faster. And I know a lot of people, when you kind of go back in your memory and you go, okay, what does this remind me of? And for a lot of people in Louisiana, this is going to be what a Rita situation was as a Category 3. Obviously not as big, not as wide, because Rita was potentially one of the strongest hurricanes ever in the Gulf of Mexico, and it was massive. The wind field was the entire Gulf of Mexico. However, you're still talking a lot of water moving inland. And with Rita, we had, I believe, anywhere from a lot of areas in central Louisiana, about 15 plus inches of rainfall. So we had a lot of areas seeing a lot of heavy rain out there, 15, 20. Now, again, for this current path, at least it's moving. And it's moving at a steady pace, too, which is good. Now, if we start to see this system slow down its forward progress, start to build a little bit, then that's where we need to keep an eye on this system. But right now, things are looking good that this system is actually going to continue to move.
All right, as promised, everybody, we're going to really just kind of hyper-focus in on KLFY's Facebook page because we have a lot of comments about that particular region, of course, that's coming in from Lafayette, Louisiana. Now, I want to caution everybody. I'm here in Florida, and some of these pronunciations, everybody, Jesse, I'm going to do my best here, and you can't laugh too hard at me as I butcher all of these names that are coming through. I did live in Mobile for 5 years. I know some of the towns, but not all of them on the Gulf Coast. And listen, in Florida, I can say Thonotosassa, I can say Okeechobee, I can say some of the tougher ones here in Florida. But our Louisiana viewers, please forgive me in advance.
It's definitely difficult at times to kind of pick up some of these names if you weren't born and raised here.
So here's what we're gonna do, Jesse. I'm gonna kind of go, as Ian controls the graphics, I'm gonna go rapid fire here, and you could just give me maybe a 5 to 10 second forecast for these individual communities. I know that so many of them are suburbs that are located pretty close together, and they're gonna be very, very similar, but just do your best here for some of the. I'll go with a D'Angela Levy Johnson, hashtag Hey Jesse. Should St. Mary Parish be concerned?
Yeah, for storm surge. You guys are pretty low at that point, so yes, I would be a little bit worried about storm surge and the potential for some heavy rainfall. St. Mary's a little bit further east, yeah, right towards the Morgan State area. Yeah, you got a lot of water in that area, so right between Franklin and Thibodaux right there. And then, again, that's the area that, yes, you could be seeing a lot of that water push inland. Luckily, if it follows this current track, you're going to be missing on that direct flow from the east. So that helps out a little bit, but yeah, you could still see anywhere from 7 to 11 feet of storm surge, and it depends on where in St. Mary you sit. If you're right along the coast, well, yeah, just be cautious because, yeah, you could be seeing those water levels rise very quickly along with some very heavy rainfall. I would assume probably weak hurricane, most likely tropical storm force winds.
All right, again, Louisiana folks, forgive me. Jamie Lynn, hashtag Hey Jesse. What about Opelousas?
Opelousas.
Yeah. Say one more. Hold on, Jesse. I want to make sure I have it right. Say one more time.
Opelousas.
Opelousas. Apologies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, now Opelousas, you're further inland, storm surge not a factor. However, potential for heavy rain and obviously inland flooding, flash flooding definitely at risk. And you're kind of just on the outskirts. You can see right there between tropical storm and hurricane force winds. Again, if the track inches slightly to the east, you're going to probably get a little bit of mix of both. Some hurricane force winds. Most of it will be tropical storm force winds.
Rhonda is asking, hashtag Hey Ian, what about Jennings? Maybe you can help us out with where Jennings is in Louisiana, Jesse, or if it's in another state.
Halfway between Lake Charles and Lafayette. You can see it right there.
Yeah, Ian's on it.
Yeah, we got lucky on that one.
Yeah, there it goes. And you can see all that body of water below it, Lake Arthur. Again, that's a pretty massive lake. So, and that connects directly. It's one of the feeders into the Gulf. So water can get pushed into Jennings. I don't see it getting as far north as I-10. So if you're, again, on the north side of the interstate, you should be fine for storm surge, heavy rainfall, and you're going to expect hurricane force winds.
We have a lot of commenters like Lachelle Beers, hashtag Hey Jesse, asking about Iberia Parish. Hopefully I got that one right.
Mm-hmm. Yep, a little bit further east right there, yeah. You're, again, it depends where, but again, if you are a little bit further south, watch out for the storm surge. Again, 7 to 11. Probably most storm surge, but again, that could push a few miles inland. You're also looking at water possibly coming in from the Atchafalaya Basin, which is on the eastern side, so pushing up the Atchafalaya River, and then that could maybe affect a few more areas. I also want to point out you're talking more so about, I would say, probably hurricane, maybe a gust or two, but most of it's going to be tropical storm force winds.
Angel Riggs Fall, hashtag AJB. What about Doosan and Scott area?
Yeah, you got it right. Doosan and Scott. That's perfect. All right. Well, yeah, again, that's a little bit further inland. Hurricane force, I would say hurricane gusts, maybe rainfall in the 3 to 6, locally some higher amounts if you fall underneath one of those feeder bands. And then, yeah, most of it's going to be tropical storm force winds.
Amy Grossi, hashtag Hey Jesse, hashtag AJB. What about Brio Bridge Parks area? Is that right? Or is it Bro Parks?
No, that's Bow Bridge. Bow Bridge is just east of Lafayette, and you're right by the basin. So there is the potential, if we get a pretty big surge up the Atchafalaya, there is the chance that you can see a little bit of storm surge. However, I'm only calling for maybe in that 2 to 4 range because as far north as Bow Bridge is, it's all the way up towards Interstate 10. So I think you're a little bit better that much inland. So I think you're good. probably most likely just strong tropical storm force winds.
I'm going to have to work on my French, everybody. I have to get back to Louisiana, get back to New Orleans a little bit, and start talking with some of the great folks down there in NOLA, because some of these I'm a little rusty. Okay, China Williams, hashtag Hey Jesse, asking about Lincoln Parish.
Yeah, Lincoln Parish, I think you're going to be a little bit better because, again, you are a little bit further north. Again, most of that's probably going to be, I believe is that in the... See, that I think is out of my range too. I think that's in north central, almost northern Louisiana. So, or up closer to Alexandria. You're talking potentially, I think, more towards the western half of the state, and that is hurricane force winds for at least a little bit. I think it's going to quickly downgrade once it gets inland to maybe a Cat 1, but you're still talking wind gusts 75 plus. So there still is the potential at times to see that. Most of it's going to be tropical storm force winds prior to arrival.
All right, everybody, I think this is going to have to be the last one, and there's so many that we would like to get to, and unfortunately we're just running out of time here. Tanya Jones, or Tahana Jones, if I'm pronouncing your name correctly, I'm sorry. Is it Karen Crow?
Yeah, Karen Crow.
Karen Crow.
Karen Crow is up Interstate 49, and it's a little bit further north. So, again, I would say a couple hurricane wind gusts, maybe most of it's strong tropical storm at this point. And I think heavy rainfall is what you got to watch. 3 to 6, locally higher amounts. Got to remember there's a lot of rivers around there, so potential that you could see those water levels quickly rise. And I think that's going to be one of the bigger issues out there. We got to watch more so inland. It's going to be all those rivers and those bayous and those streams that quickly fill at this point once you start getting a lot of that runoff.
Folks, a meteorologist's job is to know these communities, know where they are on a map, but also know how to pronounce them correctly. I see a lot of these comments making fun of me, Ian and Jesse, about how...
Sorry about that.
No, you don't have to apologize to me. Everybody, of course, we have meteorologists joining us from across the southeastern United States here on Tracking the Tropics. I am not one of them. I'm just your host here to help facilitate some of the social media comments that are coming in real time. So I see you guys making fun of me here for not pronouncing some of these Louisiana communities correctly, but I appreciate you being patient with me as we are here in Florida, but of course we cover the entire southeastern United States, and sometimes it can get a little bit dicey when we try to pronounce names that are outside of our particular region. But this has been really a fantastic extended edition, if you will, of Tracking the Tropics with meteorologist Ian Oliver joining us here in Tampa, Florida, and then Jesse Gunkel joining us here from Baton Rouge. Everybody, we're going to try to do some more of these sessions here with the hashtags that you see on your screen in the hours and days ahead to make sure that you and your family are safe as we continue to monitor Hurricane Laura with every update from the National Hurricane Center, some of the intermediate updates, the major updates, and we'll be back here live, everybody, periodically over the next several days to keep you informed as to the latest on Laura and as the track starts to become a little bit more narrow in its focus. Before we head out, final thoughts from Jesse Gunkel joining us again, Chief Meteorologist at WVLA from Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
Yeah, my final thoughts right now is just don't take this thing too lightly. Again, there is the potential. This is going to be a massive system and a lot of impacts, depending on even where you are. If you live in Louisiana, you're going to get impacted at some point. How much? That could be a big issue on the track, but you're definitely going to get something in the coming days, and it could start out as soon as early tomorrow morning. You're going to start to feel those winds pick up. You're going to start to see some of those outer rain bands. The skies are going to start to get dark. And then you're going to feel the winds getting stronger and stronger, and just anticipating that system kind of rolling in, and then the winds will start to pick up. And the worst part about this system, it's going to be an overnight storm. So please be vigilant. If the water levels start rising, get to the highest level possible in your house. You don't want to get trapped. You got to know that it may take people or emergency management a while to get to you if those water levels start to rise, because they can only get so fast. So again, water levels, National Guard's already set out towards southwest Louisiana. They're already stationed in Lake Charles right now. So again, call, but be patient just in case if something does happen in one of these areas. Again, we've got a lot of low-lying areas around here, a lot of marshes and bayous, and those can really fill up very quickly. So again, watch those water levels closely. Follow your river stages, follow local media. If you have more questions, I'm going to be pretty much going probably nonstop through this evening, throughout the day tomorrow, going into Thursday. And I cover Lafayette for a long time, so I know that area very well. If you have questions, concerns, please let me know, and I'll try to get to as many of them as possible.
Always great having Chief Meteorologist Jesse Gunkel here on the program, and even more invaluable now, not just for the pronunciations, but to know the lay of the land there in Louisiana as Laura gets a little bit closer. And, of course, the expertise of Ian Oliver here in your hurricane headquarters in Tampa, Florida, to be able to navigate all these models and all this data as it comes in real time. Everybody tracking the tropics is preparing for extended coverage, special coverage for Hurricane Laura that will kick off soon. We're not exactly sure when, but as Laura gets closer to the coastline, we'll be sure to be here for you live as a resource with all the latest data and the latest models that come in real time, and tap into our immense resource of meteorologists from across the southeastern United States to help us break down this data so that you know the very latest as we know it. So stay in touch with meteorologists such as Jesse Gunkel there in the Louisiana area. Your local meteorologist is such a precious resource at this time. And of course, Ian and I and others here in your hurricane headquarters will be on standby for the very latest regarding Hurricane Laura. To all of our viewers on KLFY's Facebook page, WGNO, KARK, WFLA, all of these Facebook pages across the southeastern United States, we appreciate it. We'll try to get to some more comments next time that we broadcast here live on Track in the Tropics. But for now, that does it for this special edition of our show, and we'll be back next time here with you with periodic updates as they come in from the National Hurricane Center. For Jesse and Ian, I'm JB. Thanks so much for being with us. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for watching.